and welcome to yet another edition of Smash or Trash Independent Filmmaking, the television program. Now, tonight's episode, we have a few things going on. Number one, we have the induction of George Stover. Well, not so much induction, but he does get his Lifetime Achievement Award. This was in 2012. We also have some footage from the Garden of Eden premiere, worldwide premiere in Baltimore City. That also was 2012. And Frank Lama talks to Jared No about the red camera. But the most fantastic thing tonight that we are here in the studio for is having East Coast independent filmmaker Kevin Kangas right here in the studio. Kevin, welcome to Smash or Trash.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, let's dive into it. I'm going to guess, what was it, mid-90s, late 90s? When did you decide to get into doing a serious first feature film?
To actually direct one, make a movie, basically?
Yeah. I mean, maybe you had some false starts or whatnot, but I mean, at some point in your life, you said, I've got some ideas. Let's get serious about this.
Well, I'd been writing for a long time, and I'd started doing scripts probably when I was about 18 is when I started writing scripts, and then in college I continued to write, and I'd send one off on occasion to try to get a production company interested, but they never did because they were pretty terrible at that point. To be honest, they really, your first couple scripts are horrible. But eventually, I actually met an actor named Rick Gans, and we started doing, shorts and stuff together and shooting a lot of things here and there. And at a certain point, we just said, why don't we just go ahead and make a movie? We'll take a little, $10,000 and make a movie. And I had a nice video camera at that point, like a really, it was a Canon L2. So at that point, it was a high-range camera. I think the camera probably cost me about $8,000, which at that point was a lot of money. And I had written a script, a horror script, a pretty standard one called The Lucky Ones, about a group of teenagers that get kind of stranded out at this, it was the point, basically. We had access to a sort of a lake, and there was a house on the lake, and we had access, a friend of mine lived there. And, it's a standard with the serial killer, shows up and kills them all in the woods and, various ways. Really uninspiring. And we eventually lost that location. We went through and actually cast quite a bit of that movie. And we were getting ready to shoot it, and we lost the location. And in hindsight, it was a great thing. So Rick had brought me an idea. He said, hey, I got an idea for this kind of movie about a slacker. He gets stoned all the time with his brother. And let's do that. Let's write a script about that. So we started working on that, and it became sort of what I called the slacker with a gun movie, which, is about this guy who, the first half of the movie is just getting used and abused. And then the second half of the movie is basically him coming back and fighting and taking revenge for his brother. So that one we even cast. And I think when we were casting that one, I came up with the idea for Hunting Humans. I think I had, in my college years, I was a bit sociopathic. And I did a lot of dreaming about killing people. I was always thought about interesting ways to kill people all the time. Which probably wasn't healthy, but I did. And so I had the idea at that point, and I'd started coming up with it, and I mentioned to Rick, I said, what do you think about this idea about, following a serial killer? You're this guy, the serial killer, and he's, he follows people's patterns, and he, that's how he always stalks them and everything. And then about, 30 minutes in the movie, he actually finds a dead body, and with a note on it says, I've got your pattern. And it turns out another serial killer is stalking him. And, Rick's eyes kind of lit up, and he's like, wow, I really want to see that. That's good. Why don't you write that? And so I actually tested it on a couple other people first, and every person I took that premise to was like, wow, that would be really cool. I want to see that, like serial killer versus serial killer. That's cool. I've never seen that before. And, because Dexter didn't rip it off before then. So, at that point, none of that stuff was around. But and so I wrote the script. I did it pretty fast, the first draft of it, and from then on we just abandoned High, which was the slacker with the gun movie. Totally abandoned it. Went with Hunting Humans, and
well, I have to say I was really impressed with your first endeavor, the Hunting Humans. Now you shot that on 16 millimeter.
Yes.
Now, is that because the people behind the camera, is that the kind of equipment they had, or had you intended on video at any point? Or
no, at that point, I remember at that point, it's so strange looking back because it seems like it's so long ago how technology has changed. But at that point, distributors didn't take you seriously unless you shot on film, because video had a whole different look to it. It just didn't look like a movie. which is really funny in hindsight now because all the filmmakers are trying to make movies look like video. Like Peter Jackson's going 48 frames per second because he wants things to look more like video now. But back then, you wanted film. Without film, you didn't have a shot at getting a real distributor. So when I was looking for a DP, I was looking for somebody who had his own rig because that was really the only way you could shoot a movie as low budget as we were looking. You'd get a guy who had his own rig and you knew how to use it. We got a reel from a guy named Dave Gill. And,
oh, yes.
Yeah. And he ended up shooting it and brought out Dave Moon, who ended up... Dave Moon was the assistant cameraman who ended up being my DP on Fear of Clowns 1 and 2.
Right. Now, you got some fairly decent distribution through, who was it, MTI Home Video for this. Yes. So that had to have been a little bit of a plus there. I mean, here, it's getting out there. What was the strange thing that happened because of this this video? There's a little bit of something about a real serial killer.
Right. A guy named... I actually didn't hear... the first time I heard about this, Rick Gans, who I hadn't had contact with in quite some time, he kind of dropped off the map. He emailed me out of the blue. Said, "You hear about this serial killer? Got caught with our movie?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then it snowballed. Within that week, I was getting requests from reporters for interviews and stuff like that. And it was playing on CNN. They were playing clips. But a guy named Adam Leroy Lane had been caught, and they suspected that he was a serial killer. And in his truck, along with the knives and throwing stars and masks and stuff that he had, was a copy of my movie in his truck's DVD player, along with, he actually had the little piece, the cardboard that you get from Blockbuster that you'd have to steal. Like if somebody rents your movie, the piece of cardboard behind it says, what movie was there, so that Blockbuster, he had taken that. So I guess he's a big fan of the movie, but all of a sudden that movie was everywhere, and it was on Dateline, NBC, Nightline, CNN.
Kind of a mixed blessing. I mean, here you have a real serial killer that has your movie, but at the same time you're getting publicity for it.
Yeah, he's a fan. I gotta respect that he's. I gotta love all my fans, no matter what their defects.
Now, the next question I'm going to have before we move on to the next movie is, I know what your answer is going to be, but I'm looking for maybe some secondary answers. What was the hardest thing about making Hunting Humans?
What do you think my answer is going to be?
Well, I would guess that your number one would be funding.
That was the first hurdle before. Yeah. That was the first hurdle. I wouldn't say it was the hardest hurdle or the most difficult thing, but I had $11,000 between the money I had saved. I basically sold a bunch of comics, and then I don't know if I've maybe not ever told anybody. Basically, at that point I owned a comic store, and I lived in an apartment, and I could not actually afford to shoot the movie and live in my apartment. So I moved into my comic store and slept on a futon for 4 months to save money. So between that, I had about $11,000, which was just enough to pay for the DP and all them to come out and to stay, and to buy, I think at that point we bought 24,000 feet of film. And that was it. So we had to keep real careful track of how much film we were actually shooting every day. And toward the end, we ran out, and my girlfriend at the time let me put another 5 rolls of film on her visa to finish, shooting. But then when we were done the movie, it sat at Photochem for 1.5 years before we had the money to actually get it developed and transferred to video so I could edit it. So that was, a big difficult, but a lot of it was just the unknown, of doing, it was the first time we'd ever actually tried to do a real professional thing in shooting this movie with, I didn't know the DP comes out, you meet him, I met him at the airport, him and Dave, and both Daves seem like nice guys, but you don't know whether they really know what they're doing, you saw what they're real, and you're shooting all this movie, and the problem, from now, people nowadays don't realize it, what you shoot on your video, you can just go look real fast and see what you shot, but back then you're shooting rolls, hundreds of feet of film, and that could be a big scratch through the entire film, and you don't know, and it was that hangs over you the whole time you're shooting, going, what do we shoot? Have we shot anything good? Is it all just, it could be just black for all you know. You just wasted $11,000 on nothing, and you have no idea. So that hung over me the whole time, and there was a point toward the end of the shoot where I remember, we were all getting kind of down and weary and tired and very exhausted, and I think, people were, Rick and Dave were griping at each other, tempers were flaring. So I paid some money to get a lab to do 300 feet. I picked 3 reels that had some cool scenes on them, and I said, let's see what this is. Let's see if we got anything, and got them just reeled, a quick one light transfer overnighted. And the transfer wasn't great, but the images looked really good. And like I could tell Rick and Dave were both like, they pepped up when they saw what we were doing. They were like, hey, you know what? We may have something here. We got some good stuff. So
Oh, that's
that really pepped
fantastic.
everybody up.
Oh, that's good. Now,